I am the mission director of Atal Innovation Mission. This is a flagship national initiative for driving innovation and entrepreneurship across the length and breadth of the country. First and foremost, I'd like to thank you all for joining today's webinar. This is a very important webinar from the point of view of it is an important initiative between two governments, the government of India and the government of Australia, to launch a hackathon on circular economy, something that is so relevant not only to our countries, both our countries, but to the world in general. And I am delighted that all of you who have logged into today's call are planning to participate in this hackathon and offer your own innovations and solutions that are so very much necessary for us to address this particular problem. We are living in very difficult times indeed, as all of you are aware, the COVID-19 times. And the COVID-19 has brought out in a very stark manner to every one of us the challenges that lie ahead, not only because of this particular pandemic that we are all facing, but also in a post-COVID-19 world, what are the other challenges that we all face, not only as individual people, but also members of nations that are seeking to provide not only economic prosperity, but societal good in whatever they are doing. And these challenges are not just limited to what we are talking about in COVID-19. We have other climate change related challenges that have been lurking in the horizon for a long period of time. We are having challenges which we have not addressed, but which we only have an idea about because we have not felt the enormity of their impact. We need to ensure that the environment is safe. We need to ensure that we are not polluting the environment more. The world of growth and the world of a superior economy has also led to a world of several other challenges that we have created ourselves because of our wanting to be able to become prosperous at the cost perhaps of our lives in our planet. And therefore, when we take a topic like circular economy, it is how do you align yourself and the innovations that are needed in this world with the sustainable development goals that the United Nations espouses? How do you ensure that we prevent waste or we reuse waste or we eliminate waste? How do we ensure that we all have our innovations aligned with many of the needs that this planet needs to be paid attention to with immediate effect? If not, we will be leaving our generation, our next generation, with problems much beyond their own capability to resolve if we are not addressing it right now. And therefore, this particular circular economy hackathon, the Indo-Australian hackathon, acquires a great significance. It acquires significance because both the prime ministers of the countries, of the respective countries, have pledged to work together and spur innovation and entrepreneurship in both the countries so that we create nations of new innovators and potentially new solutions, leveraging technology which is fast growing, affordable, accessible, available, and advanced technology that is permeating the planet. Now, I'm also delighted that today we are having three distinguished people who are going to participate, experts, I would say, who have been associated with the problems of circular economy, and they will be sharing their insights, their views, their opinions about the innovations that are needed and the potential of these innovations to solve the problems that we are talking about. At the outset, I would like to welcome Professor Haripriya Gundimeda, who is a professor of humanities and social sciences, IIT Bombay, who has completed her master's in applied mathematics from REC Warangal, earned her PhD from IGIDR Mumbai, and went on to pursue her postdoc from the University of Gothenburg in Sweden. She is also the recipient of Ratan Tata Postdoctoral Fellowship from Asia Research Center, London School of Economics. Professor Haripriya has held academic positions at Madras School of Economics and IIT Bombay, and her interest areas involve scenarios and models for biodiversity and ecosystem services, modeling food, water, energy nexus, vulnerability and adaptation costs of climate change, economics of biodiversity, resource and environmental economics, and environmental policies. We are delighted, Professor Haripriya, that you have been able to join us on this particular occasion. We thank you for your presence. We are also having Dr. Zeenat Niazi, Vice President of Development Alternatives Group, who will be providing and who provides an oversight to policy studies and development action initiatives at the Development Alternatives Group. Her work over 3 decades has focused on sustainability issues in human settlements, community-based approaches to climate and disaster resilience, and support to national, subnational, and local government in mainstreaming integrated planning for achieving Agenda 2030 and the Paris Agreement in India. Her current work now increasingly addresses resilience, building its human settlements through sustainable consumption and production strategies, especially green and inclusive circular economy models. She's a third-time member of the board of Climate Action Network South Asia, member of the Multi-Stakeholder Advisory Committee of the Sustainable Buildings and Construction Program of United Nations One Planet Network. She's also on the Strategic Steering Committee member of UNEP PAGE program in India and the Steering Committee member of the Green Economy Coalition in India. She also contributes to the Global Green Growth Platform. Thank you, Dr. Zeenat, for joining us on this particular occasion. We have also Souvik Bhattacharya, who is an Associate Director of Integrated Policy Analysis Design of TERI, New Delhi. He holds a master's degree in economics from the School of International Studies, Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi. Currently, he is pursuing a doctoral program from the Indian Institute of Management at Lucknow. He has more than 16 years of rich experience in the field of energy and the environmental research and management consulting. He was awarded the Young Global Economic Fellowship GES in 2011 by the Kiel Institute of Global Economic, Kiel, Germany. He was also selected as a fellow and a contributing lead author by United Nations Environment Program UNEP for Global Environment Outlook, as well as for the GEO6 report prepared for the Asia Pacific region. He has many other illustrious positions that he is heading. Thank you so much, Dr. Souvik Bhattacharya, for joining us also on this occasion. So I'll start off with Professor Haripriya. Can you share your thoughts and your insights on the importance of circular economy and in particular the challenges that we have launched for the IAC? And what are some of the expectations that you would have from the budding innovators who are going to be responding to this particular challenge or hackathon?
Thank you very much for inviting me for this panel discussion. It's really an important topic that India as a developing country should be actually addressing. Now, I just want to put my thoughts regarding the circular economy, though this is a new term. I think it has got a history. I mean, maybe it's like we are trying to change the term very often and come up with innovative terms. There is an innovation there itself. So, I mean, the background of that is basically going back to the sustainable development. So the concept of circular economy lies in the sustainable development concept, wherein our ambition is to pass on to the future generation at least the kind of resources that we have in the present and not deplete it. So we have to pass it on to the future generation, the better environment and not a degraded environment. That's the whole concept of the circular economy. So we spoke about the circular economy. I mean, in the sense of sustainable development, we did actually agree on the fact that definitely there is an interdependence between the man and nature and economy and the environment. As you know, like environment is one of the key inputs, right? We draw resources from the environment, we use it in the production process, but then we are also returning the resources in the form of waste back to the environment. So while we are drawing in good inputs from the environment, what we are returning back to the environment is basically bad outputs, right? So that's a key issue that we need to understand. So that's one main thing. But what we also my comments would basically be based on some economist perspective. So what happens when we are drawing these resources from the environment as inputs, but there are also like some kind of trade-offs that we face, whether we draw the inputs or we actually like return the outputs back to the environment, the bad outputs it back to the environment. So there are some trade-offs which we as a society, because we have been thinking linearly and we have forgotten the fact that we really cannot have this kind of a linear thinking no longer, right? We need to have a kind of integrated thinking, or that is what we call it as a circular thinking. So we need to really basically connect the dots and then see where we are drawing the resources and what we are giving back to the environment and how do we actually minimize the impact on the environment. So in the process, what happens, I'm talking about the trade-offs is now any excessive use of inputs, say for example, would have less outputs for the other generation, or the trade-off might also come in the form of excessive waste, for example, would itself be an impending factor for the growth process. Right. So, I mean, earlier we thought like environment and the raw materials are free, and so there is no kind of limitation. Now, but then polluted air is available in plenty, but not the clean air. Now we have polluted water in plenty, but not the clean water. Right. So what we have created is mounds of solid waste. Rather than creating like an environment which would have like very pleasing and aesthetic appeal. So these are some of the issues, and what we have created is a bad output. Now we have realized that. So from the sustainable development, when we went on to the Rio Plus 20 in 2012, what we thought is, okay, fine, let's like recoin, because we understood like sustainable development is too broad. Like we do use that term as if like it's kind of very easy to measure. But then we talked about the green economy, right? So it's basically the same thing we are trying to recycle. But then the green economy is something that also like had its own limitation in the terms of how do we green the economy is a big issue. Like what do you mean by green economy? And so now came this word circular economy is sort of kind of caught up. Because so it's like I don't exactly remember the title of the poem which is written by Rabindranath Tagore. He said like the gifts of the God. Basically, we are taking gifts from nature, and we are actually, when we are worshipping, we are returning basically the things which the God has given back to him, right? So it's something, it's basically that is the kind of concept that we have. So you're drawing in resources and basically make sure that you're giving less of bad output to the nature back. Now, how do we complete that loop is the biggest challenge for us. Right? If we don't compete, then we are actually losing in terms of the potential economic gains that we can actually generate. Because at some point of time, the environment by itself would become a limiting factor for the growth. Right? So that's what we have seen during these pandemic times. So it is environment or whatever, if we ignore that concept of nature in our thinking, so we are definitely bound to suffer. So that's a key crux of the entire circular economy model. So how do we do that is a big challenge, right? So as I mentioned, doing is not like easy, but it's not difficult, right? Now, what I would like to point out is the fact of the linear that we have so far had adopted in our system. So what we do is now we take agriculture as an output, but the input is like there are seeds, fertilizers, pesticides, and all that. And then we look at the output, but then what we do is we don't really look at the kind of inputs that we are using into the agriculture to produce output, right? But then we are also like forgotten the fact that the inputs are all like, you're excessively using certain kinds of inputs, like the fertilizers. Now, why are we using that excessive use of inputs is because of the fact that the soil quality has degraded. Right? But then what we are saying is because of a linear thinking, we are looking at value of output. From agriculture, we are looking at the value of fertilizer as an output. But value of fertilizer as an output is existing because of its value as an input, and which is a bad input, right? And it is having some damage on the environment. So it is basically the bad residues, the bad output from the agriculture is being produced along with a good output, which is for the food security. Now we really need to take this as a challenge. Now, how do we minimize these bad outputs that we're giving back to the environment, and also minimize the use of the bad inputs, right? So are there like innovative ways through which we can identify these bad inputs and the bad outputs and to minimize both of them? So if we can crack this kind of challenge, then probably we would actually achieve the circular economy that we would like to see.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Excellent,
Thank you.
Dr. Haripriya, you have set the context and the framework in a very simple manner. We take a lot from the existing resources of nature, and we tried, and when we give back to nature, what are we returning back? Are we returning back bad outputs, or are we returning back good outputs? And if we are returning back bad outputs, what is the way that we are going to minimize it or eliminate it? And when we give the inputs, it is very important for us not to look at only one specific output as a criteria, as a value of the input. The value of the input should be looked at. What are the other side effects that that input is also having? And when you start looking at a broader picture of not only the intended output, which may be, as you said, you use fertilizers to improve some agricultural output, but what are the other side effects and the side outputs that get created, which is actually going to damage further the value of the input in the first place. As the soil itself, for example, today, many of the agricultural fields suffer from excessive fertilization, pesticides, and so on, and the quality of the soil itself deteriorates. And as a result, the intended output at some point in time is going to suffer even more dramatically than the immediate output that you see. So these are very, very important aspects, and therefore giving back to nature as much as you have taken from it, the good outputs, is very important and central to this thinking of the circular economy. I'd like Dr. Zeenat to share her insights and views on what Professor Haripriya said. And in particular, we have become a society where we are generating so much of packaging waste, and it's really gone to an extreme. You're using plastics, you're using electronic waste which cannot be reused, and so on. So what are your thoughts on some of these real life problems that we are facing today, and we seem to be finding it very difficult to get out from? I think you're on mute.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Dr. Ramanan, and thank you, Dr. Haripriya, for setting the sort of a base. Couple of things that I would like to share with the audience today, especially also in the light of the Indo-Australian hackathon that the Atal Innovation Mission has organized. One, I think let's go back to the basics to look at the principles of circularity. Or even before that, how did it come about? So, a lot of our work that we began in looking at efficiencies and sustainable consumption production were in the beginning looked at from the perspective of economic efficiency. So, output upon input, and how are we going to get maximum value out of what we are putting in? And then that was probably stage one. And then as we went ahead in the industrial and other processes, what do you do with pollution and what do you do with waste? So while on the one hand, you had all the compliance to manage pollution, but byproducts and waste to be brought back into the system or reuse. And so a lot of it was waste management. But the circular economy, has gone much, much beyond that. And so on one hand, you have the issues of ecological security. So whereas we had, don't damage the environment and don't damage and don't cause pollution. So ecological security. The other hand is also the concern about resource security, because we do realize that going in the future, there is that much more products to be developed, buildings to be made, highways to be done. There is infrastructure to be done. And this especially in context of countries like ours, and where are the resources for it? So resource security becomes an issue, and therefore manage in what you have. So how do you manage in what you have unless you make sure that the resources that you've got out of the system stay productive and value added within the system. So the three key principles that are established for circular economy is: one, you have to design out. So you have to think through to design out the waste and pollution. So your process itself does not generate any. And the Z processes, for example, in the country do that or aim to do that. But the other, as I mentioned, is keep products and materials in use so that you extend life. You make sure your products have a retained value for much, much longer, and you don't go into the obsolescence space. And the third, I think, very, very important from our perspective is regenerate natural systems, which also means move away from totally abiotic. We are moving into the abiotic space, moving into a much more biotic space where natural systems become your ally and your resources to move forward. This would lead us into doing three kinds of thinking, whether it's plastics, whether it's electronics, whether it's any other product, that we have to rethink design. So there is eco design. So you have to, design has to start by thinking of the end of life first. So the whole cycle has to be thought through in the design process. The second is that you have to do a process rethink. How do you do your production processes? And all of that, will need to be rethought. And whether it's at the large industry level or whether it's at small scale level, that becomes an important principle to take forward. And the most important thing, a lot of us don't consider that when we are in the manufacturing arena, etc. There is a consumption rethink, something that we have to look back also into our traditional and cultural ways of doing. You don't throw away. The throwaway culture has to go back. You have to go back into the reuse culture. What are the things that can be reused? How many times can you reuse them? How can you refurbish to make sure that the value of the resource stays within the system? And so, in all of this, and like I mentioned, end of life conception becomes very important. Complex systems have to become such that they can be sorted out at the end and re-put together with minimal energy, inputs into it, brought into reuse again, but also be recycled in a manner that they go into the next life. So, like it was mentioned earlier, that composting, regenerating, which means moving into a biotic kind of economy. But in all of this, within our country's context, within the context of also the issues of plastics or other things, one, we must consider that we are a diverse country. We are a country that, and so we use that diversity to the advantage, the potential to the advantage. So you don't become a one-fit-all solution. The solutions have to be diverse to fit these complexities. We are a decentralized society, which means that we are many of different kinds, which means we don't design for centralized solutions. So even if you are looking at, let's say, plastic management or electronic waste management or textile waste management or construction debris management, we should be looking at systems which can be reduced down and downscale and easier to be managed. The third thing I think is very, very important in our context, which is in all of this process, because remember, circular economy came through from an economic efficiency, pollution, and then ecological security angle. In all of this, the one big context which our kind of countries require is job creation. How do you do all of this while you are creating jobs? So it means that at every stage of the value now circle, I don't want to call it a value chain because now it's a value circle. How do you create more jobs? So where are the business models? Where are the revenue streams that we can look at? So the innovation really has to be in that, being able to generate those revenue streams. And at every stage, when you are generating value, how much of that value is local? And so it's not, you're creating more economic development and local ecology health locally, and how much of that local value is retained there, so that we are, so these become an important consideration for contexts like India. The last final point that I want to make here is that while in our hackathon we are looking at 4 streams and we are addressing them, but we must remember that the end might be that of getting into the food sector, into the plastics sector. But we must also remember that for that end product or the end use, there is an intersectoral potential that we must not forget. So from one sector, resources could go into another sector, and that is where real symbiosis and circularity will probably emerge in our country, because there are new resource streams that each sector is generating, and those resource streams may not be circular within their own sector but could actually be circular cross sectorally. So that's the other space of innovation that we may want to look at. I think with this, I would like to end to say I'm sure it's going to be an exciting hackathon with very, very interesting solutions that, and I'm so glad that we are actually addressing startups and young professionals and young groups, because really the small agile businesses, the small agile thought is now required to disrupt the central large spaces that we have and create value. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Zeenat. That was indeed enlightening, and I would say very thought-provoking. And because this is perfect, this is exactly what our young budding innovators there want to hear. Where is it that you can apply your imagination, and how can you innovate to make circular economy a reality? And you brought out 3 very fundamental aspects. One is you have to rethink design. Make sure that when you're rethinking design, you are looking at what is the end life, at the end state of that particular product, and how are you going to make sure that you're maximizing the utilization of the product as well as the value that you're going to get without creating negative value. Second is you talked about process rethink. So that's a great area for innovation, because how do you direct your processes to be able to manufacture more efficiently, create lesser negative impact, create more positive outputs, conserve the resources, and so on and so forth. And finally, you also said consumption rethink. Do we really need all the stuff? When we are manufacturing something and we are designing something, from a consumer's point of view, how do you maximize reuse of that, or how do you maximize the shelf life of anything that you produce, so that you are not creating waste if indeed waste is being created in the process? And then you also brought out the need for us to have a holistic approach in our thinking, because we don't want circular economy to also create some other problems like lack of job creation. How do you ensure that there is creation of jobs by these young innovators who come up with solutions in the process of reimagining process or design or consumption? And then I think you brought out a very important point, and which is in a circular economy, the waste produced by one sector can actually be very useful for another sector, and vice versa. So this interdependence of sectors and thinking of circular economy as a play between multiple sectors is something that one should very innovatively think about, so that you're maximizing the reuse factor and eliminating the need to create more waste in the process, because it is everyone is wanting that particular input which is being produced as a side effect of another process, and how do you leverage that? So great. It really sets it gives the entire perspective of the possibility of innovation making a great contribution. And now I'd like to go to Dr. Souvik Bhattacharya ji. Souvik ji, I'm always curious to know your different points of view on whether technology is an evil or whether it is good, and whether technology is going to actually enhance this solutions to the circular economy, or is it going to create more problems for the circular economy? Already there is talk about whether you should have artificial intelligence is going to create problems for jobs, etc., and that is from a software angle or from a processing of data angle. But then there is so many technologies which have, automotive. If we didn't have the automotive industry, we probably would never have traveled. would still be in our villages, and we'd, at the maximum go to the neighboring village and come back during our lifetime. But at the same time, today we are reeling under the effects of automotive technologies having reached where they have reached. So it would be great to hear your insights on a circular economy, and what are the challenges, or what are the technical, what are the role technology can play in creating problems or in innovating to solve them.
Right. Thank you so much for this initiative, and congratulations to both the Indian government and the Australian government for taking this initiative and bringing the new thought and the thinking process to come up with like really disruptive thinking and technological and process that can address this challenge which we are all facing. Let me just try to set the things into perspective, and then I'll go into the questions that you refer to, and it's most important question that possibly we need to answer before we start this hackathon. The traditional way of macroeconomic practices have been the kind of production consumption behavior, where the production of goods happening at the firm level, the consumption taking place at the households level, and the households producing or providing their inputs to during the production process. Now, there are also a host of other resources which are essentially going into the manufacturing system. Some do we value, sometimes we are not able to value. Now, there is a time when this consumption actually goes to such an extent that the dependence on natural resources become very high, and in the absence of adequate intervention, it would be very difficult for us to actually retain a kind of a system which is sustainable and helpful for the future generations to live. And that is why this entire discussion is coming up. But that is one macro perspective, traditional perspective, which is there. More importantly, which I would like to highlight, is the economics part. We have discussed about the environmental part and to a large extent on the social part. But if we look at the economics part, it is the countries fortunately or unfortunately do not have equal sharing of various resources, or I would say biotic resources. Maybe certain countries are blessed enough to have certain type of materials, and certain countries are not so much blessed with availability of certain kind of materials. But that doesn't mean that all the countries, or the countries who are deprived of such materials availability, should not be having an aspirations for a better living. So we should have demand for our automotive and independent mobility. We should have our demand for a modern form of electricity generations, and so on and so forth. So as a result, but if we are more dependent on that imports or supply risks, we are exposing ourselves to more such risks in the future. We have seen a series of episodes in the last 30, 40, 50 years when the price of oil has shot up almost 300 to 400 times. And it had a huge trade account deficit for countries, and India definitely is one of them. In recent years, we have seen, say, for example, the growing dependence on solar PVs. And I come to that particular technological aspect that we are talking about. Now, there are many materials that are being used in modern technologies for which we may have resources, and in certain cases, we may not have resources. And we are dependent very much on the imports. For example, lithium, or for the example, rare earth materials. We are now talking about electric vehicle revolution, the automotive revolution in the by introducing electric vehicles. But what will happen to this revolution if we are not able to have a dedicated and a continuous flow of these resources into the system and at affordable prices, so that it is enjoyed and consumed by all in a manner that is equitable, sustainable, and affordable. Now, it is during that time we are talking about the aspect of circularity, how we are able to retain some of the materials being taken out from the existing systems and bringing it back to the production system. And this entire the circularity along the various steps of the manufacturing system is so critical. I see the entire circularity fragment into 5 or 6 major parts along the different life cycle stages, right from manufacturing to consumption, to production, to usage, and the end of life. And when we are talking about the opportunities that exist across this different life cycle, there are 6 R's that we find that would be extremely relevant, going beyond the reduce, reuse, and recycle to something which is more in terms of looking at remanufacturing, redesigning, and refurbishing, because that's where the new level of innovations are going to play. And I think among other things, technology, process, and regulation, one of the areas would be like to look at some of frugal innovations which we can bring it into the system that will not only have some immediate cost advantages, but it might also help us get the criticality so far the volumes are concerned, so far the scales are concerned, and as and when we see certain successes, we will be able to bring in more resources to take it to a kind of a different level. So let me stop here right now, and then maybe I'll be more than happy to take this discussion forward.
Thank you, Dr. Bhattacharya ji, and I think that is very relevant to what the earlier two speakers also shared. And I think you highlighted two things. One is, when does consumption become so excessive that it starts creating irreversible damage? And when we and how do we get alerted to that? How do we stop it in time, and how do we prevent it using circular economy strategies and so on? So that becomes very relevant and very crucial. And I think this is a very important point, because while in the pursuit of alternative solutions that we may be looking at, I think this factor needs to be kept in mind, because resources are not equally present in all the countries. And you are still having aspirational people across in many countries, and they are looking for better lifestyle to improve from where they are. And when you have this unequal sharing of resources, but an equal aspiration in terms of people's wants and desires, how are we going to match this and manage this in a very innovative manner, leveraging technology or leveraging a shared economy, or really leveraging, more importantly, the principles of circular economy, which can bring to bear? And third is, you brought out very nicely the importance and the great advantage India has in coming up with frugal innovations. In fact, we can be the source of frugal innovations across the world, because traditionally, I mean, a country like India needs frugal innovations with 715 districts and 650,000 villages. It's not possible for people to afford some of the innovations and interventions that are generally available in the Western world. So you need to be able to arrive at. But it also goes back to the point that Dr. Zeenat said, that traditionally we have also been a culture where we have maximized reuse. We were not given to waste. In fact, in a typical Indian household doesn't waste anything. They try to use it to their maximum. But as the economy prospers, as people become prosperous, the tendency to waste, to accumulate, to consume more than you, to buy more than what you actually consume, these become the bigger challenges. And as you rightly also said, technology can play a very positive role in solving this. Now, I want to ask a question to all the panelists, and I would request each of you to give your views. We look upon circular economy. So far, the discussion has primarily been it can be for good of the society. But from a business point of view, for any business, can a business be sustainable at all if they don't practice circular economy in the long run? I'd like your views on that, because it's not so, looking from a societal point of view, yes, you do need to be able to address these challenges. But more and more businesses are realizing that they cannot sustain themselves if they don't practice circular economy themselves in their processes, in their products, in their services, and so on. So we can start off with Professor Haripriya, your views and thoughts on that.
Yeah, it's a very interesting question, which I've been also thinking about when we talked about the circular economy. So one of the key facets of circular economy, one of the key things that we need to be doing is to increase the value durability of the products. That's what was one of the key important steps for achieving circular economy, right? So that means what we require is extension of the lifetime of the products. And then we might also want to do this high quality recycling. Now, a very interesting question. If you just look at the existing mobile phone markets, now you buy a mobile phone for 40,000 rupees. The very latest, I mean, it's a kind of the gadget, and you need to like keep upgrading every 3 years. And maximum the life of the phone is like for 3 years. Now, if they have to be in business, I mean, they gain only if you keep on coming with some innovation and you change it, right? Otherwise, they don't have life. And the other thing they do is the accessories. Now, suppose many of us, I think we would have faced this issue at some point or the other, like, you know, your power button is not working, and then and then they say that, you know, the exact phone costs you like 30,000 or 40,000, but to change that power button, which requires the entire back panel to be changed, and they would charge you like 10,000 rupees. Now, are we going to achieve circular economy? This is the case. This is exactly the question, because companies are the way of making their businesses, and you're forced to basically either, I mean, recycle is the term, but then the consumer surplus is actually decreasing in the process. The producer surplus would still increase because of the circular economy, but then the consumer surplus is definitely going to decrease because their interests do not match. So that's my. There are several other examples wherein now the reuse and the recycling, actually the repair has become extremely difficult now. That's basically India is also following the trend of the developed countries, where repair, for example, you have a watch, and if you can't replace a cell, and it becomes extremely difficult to actually get the thing repaired. Instead, it's cheaper to buy a product rather than get it repaired. So we are into that kind of consumerism world, right? Now, that's basically where there are divergent interests. Now, that's the thing that we need to answer, all of us. Yeah.
So
thank you.
You brought on Thank you, Professor Haripriya. I think you brought a wonderful problem in front of us, and that is, on one side, we heard the importance of frugal innovation, which Dr. Souvik talked about. On the other hand, when innovation becomes frugal and affordable, you also create a glut in the market, because you have now more and more affordable accessories, more and more affordable phones, more and more affordable devices. And now so there is an inherent contradiction in your ability to produce more at lower cost and to be able to contain the effects of that in terms of the waste that it produces or the excess that it produces. Dr. Zeenat, how do you resolve this conundrum? This is a very interesting problem that we all have.
Let me unmute myself. Yeah, I think very interesting point. And definitely, you know, the businesses are at conflict. Yeah, kya kare? But I think one point that we have to probably bring in is that because consumption and runaway consumption as economic, and especially, you know, when you have a middle class like India, growing middle class like India, the runaway consumption is stressing your ecological base. So integrating ecological cost into cost of products is a necessity. So you know, ecological accounting, true cost accounting, will become a necessary condition, and along with mandatory disclosures that products will have to make. There's a lot of international pressure for this. I know that the government of India is also thinking about it. So as this comes into being, you realize that has a direct impact on the product or the price of the product that the consumer will pay. Now, the Indian market, for whatever it is, and many other markets, is a very price sensitive market. So, you know, you are going to have a business rethink which says, okay, now if I have to integrate the cost of the landfill into my plastic packaging, what am I going to be doing? Because now that 5 paisa plastic polythene which I will throw away will actually start costing me that much more, because I have to include the cost of the landfill and the carbon dioxide I am producing when that plastic has to be produced. So, you know, if I have to package my food tins into flexi packaging, maybe I will think of something else. Maybe I might think of another product instead of the flexi plastic and reduce all of that other indirect costs Actually, those are direct costs, but we don't count them in at the moment. That is number one. The other thing is that we might start seeing that shared economy itself is a business model. So just as, now we don't think twice about picking up a phone and calling the cab, which is not our own car, but it's a shared, it's a shared space thing. We have looked at shared spaces, which means reduction of infrastructure. If you go deeper, you see shared apparel. So even in the fashion industry, you see a shared economy. So there are business models that are going back to what used to be, if you recall, in the Punjab area, something called a Sanja Chula. People would cook together because the chula was common. Here you have the car common, you have the working space common. So the product has changed into a service. It's no longer cool to own the car because I don't need to own the car. It's no longer cool to own a whole infrastructure for my business because I can rent it out. And I think that's probably where a lot of our so the other two R's, which I would like to add to Souvik's R's, are reduce and refuse. We might want to refuse things because we don't need to own them anymore, and they can be going around. So, and they can be localized business models. They can be large scale citywide business models of that effect. So there is a whole lot of innovation that is there, and businesses can actually flourish and grow, and new businesses can come out of this.
Excellent. Wonderful thoughts, Professor Zeenat. And I think this is something that, you brought out very, very interestingly, which every business has to adopt, and maybe regulation is also required. How do you build the ecological cost of a product into the total cost of the product? And how do you ensure that that is recognized and the impact of that particular cost? And businesses become very clear that not only is this a cost of the product to me, but this ecological damage is in long term a big cost to me. And therefore, I have to minimize that particular cost or eliminate that cost. And if businesses become aware and consumers become aware of this, then you have a double whammy sort of pressure, both upon the business as well as the consumer, saying that I need, products that are ecologically friendly and which is not adding to the ecological cost, even though I'm paying certain amount of money. The second point that you brought about, and actually it brought a smile to my face, because you talked about shared apparel, shared services. When I was doing my stint in Harvard, there was this one of these runaway success. I think it was called Fashion Runaway or something. There was a startup who came up with just sharing apparel for parties. Going for weekend parties is a big thing in the US, and people want to be seen in different dresses. So they started this where you can have an apparel shipped to you in 24 hours, re-altered if you want, in a very short period of time. And that became a big runaway success. So that many youngsters started buying that for weddings, for parties, and so on and so forth. There's a big case study on Harvard. But this is a very important point. We are at a junction in India where shared services and a shared economy will make a huge sense and huge positive impact, and thereby create the circular economy effect that we talk about. And finally, you talked about reuse versus and refuse. When do you reuse and when do you refuse? Now, in this, Dr. Souvik, please add your thoughts to whatever has been said. But I have also one question, and that is, how do we build this awareness within the people? This very important part in their decision of consumption, buying, and affecting what they buy and how they buy it. Is it possible to be able to build that awareness of a circular economy through innovative mechanisms, through better promotion of this concept in schools and universities, as well as in the industry? Your thoughts on that?
Thanks, Mr. Ramanan. In fact, I was planning to touch upon that particular aspect, and it's extremely important. Maybe if I would like to rather answer the last question first and go into other aspects of the ways it will help businesses for addressing circular economy. I think one of the critical aspects, and let me start with the manufacturers because we are talking about business, and then I'll go to the other stakeholders. when we are talking about businesses, one of the things or the basic principles of marketing is about how we are able to create a promise to the consumers. What kind of customer value proposition that businesses have. Now, this is a very good entry point for industries to actually co-create value with their customers. Now, if the industries are aware of the fact that availability of resources is going to affect them, their future operations, it's going to affect their costs, it's going to even affect their entire existence, then they need to plan in advance and communicate in the right way to their consumers that, look, the association that you have with my businesses, with my brands, is not going to be there in the next 10, 15, 20 years because we are so much dependent on these materials. So given the fact that I have this understanding and now I am communicating with my consumers intelligently, then how I can co-create value. So let me understand, if I have to propose a new promise to my consumers and new kind of a value proposition, how I can do it jointly. So that's where the businesses need to work together with the consumers to identify newer products. But that should not end there, because in order to retain that level of confidence which Zeenat was referring to, and you are also referring to a kind of a set of regulatory mechanisms which should bring that kind of a confidence in the form of standards, in the form of say quality and related things, so that the satisfaction or the customer belief for those kind of products should be even more enhanced and strengthened. So that is one aspect. The other areas which Zeenat already mentioned about the shared services, which we have seen kind of a big success in the mobility space, but definitely in the apparel space, because I see a lot of these school children and young students performing in their either school or college programs, and they don't procure dresses. They simply go and hire them from a specific person for a couple of days, use it and just give it to them. So that's coming up in a big way. The third aspect is the aspect of indirect cost. It is not the direct cost, it is the indirect cost. If I have to say, for example, process, say aluminum from bauxite, so the kind of energy that I would need, and given the fact that the energy itself is scarce, how will I able to really be in this business in the long run? So it all the more calls for a kind of a thinking, a circular thinking, again, like talking about the relevant aspect in that value chain, that particular business in, to see that which one of those 5 or 6 hours is most relevant. And it makes more sense to target that one in the short, medium and long term.
Wonderful, wonderful. Dr. Souvik, circular thinking is very important to relate to lead to a circular economy, and co-creating value between the consumer and the manufacturer. Co-creation. This is important because the consumer should think that what is the impact of this product on whatever, from a long-term perspective. That awareness building is very important. And so when that awareness builds up, then the creation of value in a product automatically gets refined better and better to make sure that the, what Dr. Zeenat referred to earlier, as well as Dr. Haripriya, Professor Haripriya said, that we want to give back to the environment as much, if not more, than what we got as good outputs. So we have to be able to ensure those good outputs go back to the environment, just like we are taking the resources to create the desired outputs that we need. So I know this discussion can go on and on. It's been very, very engaging, but I would like each of you to leave some thoughts to the young budding innovator. There are two categories of people who can respond to this hackathon. One are students who can give their ideas, and the best ideas will be selected. They need not be innovations themselves or products themselves, but they are best ideas which can get converted into a product or a solution or a process innovation. So that is one category. And then you have startups or entrepreneurs who are already creating solutions and prototype of innovations. So that's the second category of people who will be responding to this challenge, and both will be recognized. So parting thoughts from you, Professor Haripriya, to start off with, and followed by Professor Zeenat and Dr. Zeenat and Dr. Souvik.
Yeah. Thank you very much. This is very interesting because the young generations are the torchbearers for circular economy. I mean, they have many ideas. It's like, and they think they think out of the box, not like the traditional thinking. So my challenge or my to the young entrepreneurs are to create a system which is self-sufficient, right? Basically, you draw in resources, but then, the waste is also reutilized back. So you need to come out of the linear thinking and then come into the circular way of thinking right from the way. So any innovation or any challenge, and that too, India being mostly a rural economy, and their solution should be tailored to the rural economies more than the urban economies. So that's where, but they are not digitally savvy. So their innovation should also be tailored for the rural economies as much as they are actually targeting the urban dwellers. So that's my challenge.
Indeed. A very important message indeed to all our young innovators out there. 70% of India is still in the tier 2, tier 3 cities and in rural India. And unless your innovative idea is able to address their challenges and make their lives better in the long run, we would not be doing much of a service to them. So there is a great opportunity to be able to integrate this thinking of how to benefit the rural masses of our country, the tier 2, tier 3 cities and the small MSMEs out there who can also become potential job creators in a circular economy based model. Dr. Zeenat, your thoughts and your encouragements to the young innovator.
I think I'm already very excited to look forward to what will come in, and I think there'll be many more like me looking for these ideas and solutions that are coming in. So I hope our expectations are a motivator. That we are as much consumers of the products and services these innovators are providing us. So that's one. But I think what I would like to tell our innovators, both at the idea level and at the startup business level, is empathy. Think with empathy. Think with care. Very often we are blown away by tech. And Dr. Haripriya mentioned that we should be looking at spaces which are probably yet digitally unequal. So how do we look at leveraging the benefit of tech, but being able to reach to that last mile? And not just look at that, but also think of the fact that the future, in my view, is nature. So leverage nature. How do we leverage nature in our solutions such that we are working with nature, not extracting from nature? So I think it's a big challenge to not just mimic, but to work, shoulder to shoulder with nature. We are part of the natural environment. How do we do that? So that's my two messages: think with empathy, design with empathy, and design with nature.
I think Professor Zeenat, Dr. Zeenat, you brought out a very important point, which I was planning to say long back before I started, but I forgot completely about it. If you want to look at how circular economy really works, look at nature. See how nature ensures that every little thing that is produced from the tree which grows and which gives back whatever it takes from the soil and goes and gives back. I mean, it's a work of design and empathy and all of the things that you're talking about. Nature is by itself the perfect example of a circular economy of innovation at its highest level. Now, if you look at that and then you see, how can I go back to that natural state of affairs where whatever you take, you give back, and every little part is used in some manner or the other, right? So that is very important. And then you said that can only happen with empathy, true empathy, and use technology to use digital technology to bridge the digital divide. That's a very important point, because you don't want to increase the digital divide because of digitalization and transformations that are happening in the digital world. Your thoughts finally, Professor Souvik, on this and your encouragement to the young innovators.
Yeah, thanks. I think wonderful thoughts Professor Haripriya and Zeenat had shared. Just to balance so that we can also have a little bit on the tech part, uh, I think if we look at the entire value chains across various products and services, what is still missing in India, although there are innovations taking place, is the end of life management of various materials or products. So, and unfortunately, because we are not able to really have a good reverse logistics practices, we are not able to make good use of those materials and products in a most cost effective manner, and that can compete with some of their virgin counterparts. So I personally feel that that is an area where a lot of opportunities exist across various sectors in the biotic as well as in the abiotic space, particularly in the food chain, is very important. And that's where we can contribute a lot. So far, the manufacturers who are interested in investing in making use of the secondary materials as potential substitutes for the virgin materials, they have to have them right at the place where they are going to be processed. How we bring them right at the place of processing. So let us focus also on that part in a manner in line with the larger two objectives which already have been shared by Professor Haripriya and Zeenat. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Souvik, for those very encouraging words and for pointing out the importance of technology and processes when you are thinking of circular economy and of innovating. And with that, very reluctantly, I am bringing to an end this particular panel discussion, but I'm sure every one of you who have joined this particular call would now feel greatly inspired. I feel greatly inspired personally listening to these wonderful panelists on the possibilities that there are before us to be able to solve a problem that needs a solution and needs it urgently. And therefore, I think every one of you who have listened to this particular webinar or are going to investigate and explore more, please put in your ideas, please submit your innovation entries. It is not so important that you should have everything thought through. Nothing is ever fully thought through in life. No innovation is fully thought through. That is what innovation is all about. You start off with a great idea, resulting in a prototype into a product that we could continuously improve and innovate on. And that is what we are seeking from every one of you young innovator out there who is listening to this. Thank you very much, Dr. Haripriya, Dr. Souvik, and Dr. Zeenat for participating in this in such an enthusiastic manner. And I'm sure I can rely upon all the three of you to mentor our young innovators who would be responding to this. And we will be putting them in touch with you at the right time to seek your guidance and your counseling as they push their innovation into a solution for tomorrow. Thank you all very much. Have a great evening. It is Christmas Eve. So Merry Christmas to all of you who are celebrating Christmas. Greetings of the season. And of course, a very, very happy New Year to every one of you and your families. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I wish you the same. Thank you so much.